All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Rise Above Justice Movement, the podcast. My name is Zachary Mallory, and I am the host and the founder of the Rise Above Justice Movement and the Rise Above Justice Movement, the podcast. All right. Today, I'll give a viewer discretion is advised due to the nature of the topics that we will be discussing. Okay. So, we are here with an incredible human being that came very highly recommended as all of the candidates that have been hand chosen by myself and the team behind the Rise of Justice movement. Um, this one came very, very highly recommended. So, without further ado, Dr. Bri Serrano, running for Covina City Council. I am so excited to welcome you to the podcast. So
Hi.
incredibly honored to sit down and talk with you because, should you win, and I have a very strong suspicion that you absolutely will because your platform is incredible, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. But the story behind why you're running is also incredible, and you would also break history. So we'll dive into that and talk about that. But first things first, and I know this is a very loaded question, but the first question to you that I have for you is, what is your story, and how has your story influenced you to run for city council?
Hi, and thank you so much for having me today. I'm incredibly humbled and privileged to be here and sharing space with you. Um, yeah, so there's multiple reasons why I'm running for city council here in the city of Covina, District 5. My story really is one that I think is quite similar to other millennials and folks, especially during this timeline. I was born in the San Gabriel Valley, here where the Covina is at Queen of the Valley Hospital. It's since been bought out by a um, large medical group, Eminent Health, in West Covina. My family comes from, the lineage comes from Mexico. My grandparents' family came here and really worked in the fields, picking fruit and after that, my grandpa went to World War II and was a veteran. He got a Purple Heart because he was hurt in combat. And after he passed away, we found out he was a sniper, which I thought was pretty badass. And my grandma was with him for quite a long time. Unfortunately, he had some PTSD from that and had chronic diabetes later in life. And a lot of intergenerational trauma came from all of that. And so I was lucky enough to be able to spend years with them as they were getting older. And my papa was a veteran as well. And he served in the army, just as my grandpa did. And he is still here with us, thankfully. And I only live about 20 minutes away from him. So I do appreciate spending time with him and caretaking for him. So I grew up all over Southern California. After being born here in the San Gabriel Valley, living here till about 2 years old, we moved to the Inland Empire, which is the IE, known as the IE, Montana, till about 11. My parents unfortunately separated and divorced. Then I moved to the Coachella Valley till I was about 18 years old when my mom was remarried to my stepdad. And he started off as a gardener and created his own business from there and really just did landscaping for a lot of homes and communities, retirement communities in Palm Springs, Palm Desert, and it really flourished. So when it was time for me to go to college, I went to Cal State Fullerton. I double majored in American Studies and sociology with specializations in education and family studies. And I really discovered what it meant to work in higher education because a lot of my mentors worked there, and I didn't realize people worked in higher ed full time. So I did a couple internships during undergrad at Columbia University in New York City, And that was the first time I left Southern California for long periods of time, and I fell in love with New York. It's the best. I loved it so much. Um, I love the East Coast vibe. I'm kind of a like quick go, go, go kind of person. You know, I love the vibe of it and the hustle. I do not like living in snow. And so, given that, I moved to Pennsylvania for grad school. I went to Penn State for my master's. I got a full ride scholarship. I will note that all of my education has been completely public school educated. And so I was there for 2 years, worked at Swarthmore my first year in the profession of higher education as a administrator, like working as a both like a combination of like a administrative assistant and program coordinator at the Intercultural Center there. And right before that, though, working at Penn State, my graduate assistantship was at the LGBT Center, and I was supervised by the founder of that center, who had also founded the center at UC Davis, Allison Sabasic, and her wife was one of my faculty members. And so I really was able to engage with LGBTQ services in higher ed at the time. And so I fell in love with it. I fell in love with serving and supporting underrepresented students. And I did not have an LGBT center when I was a student at Cal State Fullerton. So my first job back at, in California was being a coordinator of the LGBTQ center at Cal State Fullerton and also advising ICA, which is the intercultural uh, organization under the student government. And I went to Cal Poly Pomona after that for 5.5 years, overseeing the Pride Center there and then Cal State Dominguez Hills. And now I'm at the Claremont Colleges. I'm the assistant dean and director of the center there. I finished my PhD in 2024. And so my research is very unique. I am the only researcher who has done research specifically on the lived experiences of trans staff of color who report discrimination in higher education. And I also have some peer-reviewed articles that examine holistic admissions where race is used. And that research was used in the SFFA versus Harvard legal briefs and the Supreme Court case. And so we all know how that court case went several years ago. And at the same time, I've also had chapters focusing on queer Latinidad, QT Latinx experiences, and it's been wonderful to be able to do that work. And at the same time, navigating politics in higher education has been fascinating to be able to pivot between students, alumni, faculty, administration, parents, families, and really just doing education and support for students who are oftentimes unhoused, undocumented, experiencing intersectional oppression, educating people that other people exist. And that's really the basis of it. And I have done education to really get myself out of a job. I always told people I need to not have this job, right? Um, and so I find myself in a place now to want to run for city council and to put myself in a position to run for city council because it is a calling for me to serve the community where I live. And so about last August is when I submitted my intent to run. I spoke to the what I believe to be the incumbent at the time, who said that he would be running. He had been serving in that role for 36 years. At the time, I was 36 years old. So he said he was going to run against me. I just did a courtesy to have a conversation with him. And I put my papers in, and I've been fundraising ever since October. And then in December, he decided to retire. And so he tapped the current city clerk to run against me. And that's the race right now. And so I had been going to city council meetings for over 5 years since the shutdowns that were still happening in 2021. And I got to a point last year when the ICE raid started to begin in Los Angeles County. And ironically, over a year ago, I told our city council that they would begin here in Los Angeles County. And I said, we're talking about pancakes for Easter when we should be talking about people and their human experience right now because it's about to go down in LA. And they refused to listen, as they did for many other things that I have brought to City Council, including bringing down the cost of living, thinking about tenants' rights, thinking about the lighting, the lack of lighting. in our city streets and residential streets, depending on where they live, right? Childcare needs, elder needs. And look what happened last summer. And so I got to a place of saying, you know what? I'm just going to come and take your job. And so that's why I'm here.
Which sometimes that's exactly what you need to do. You need to say, hey, I see this injustice. It's time for change. It's
Yes.
time for progress. It's time to move not only the city, the
Yes.
state, but also the country forward, right? And
Absolutely.
this is a time where marginalized communities are facing the absolute hardships of the trickle down, well, to put it bluntly, the trickle down bullshit that continues to happen, right? And
Hmm.
not only, trans people, but also disabled people and people of
Yes.
color. And, my mom is battling stage 3 cervical cancer. And it's a
Mm.
very real thing that at
Oh,
any
thank you for
point
sharing
in
that.
time, her Medicaid could be ganked, right? And
Yep.
the cost of living is obviously astronomically super high. Um, there's been times that, we've had to make the decision of, do we put food on the table, or do we pay our phone bill? Do we pay our rent? Do we pay our car payment? Do we pay the car insurance? Which car insurance rates are like astronomically high too. I think for two vehicles, we pay upwards of 500 to 600 each month, which is insane. That's literally more than both my mom and my partner's car payments combined. And that's just for
Wow.
like car insurance, right?
Yeah.
So just thinking about the affordability crisis, which I know is obviously a part of your platform,
Hmm.
and speaking of which, let's kind of dive into that a little bit. So, whenever we think about affordability, right, walk me through what Covina looks like as far as like the people, right?
Yeah.
Walk me through what the community looks like. What does it, whenever you're going out and talking to people,
Hmm.
what are some of the things that you are hearing as far as some of the top concerns that people in the city and in your district are thinking about? What are they talking about that they need? I know this is like a multi-part question, but we can just kind of like break it down. But at this point, let's just walk through your district. What are some of those concerns that you are hearing?
Yeah. So there's several. One, there's a couple stories coming to mind. So, and I won't share their names. One person who I knocked on their door, I would say maybe about 2 months ago, shared with me how she literally can't leave her home because it was hard for her to even get to the door physically. She has no one who lives with her. She has contacted the city to help her get access to the transportation the city offers in order to take her to her medical appointments. And so the response from the city was, well, we cannot provide the transportation to take you to your medical appointments because you have to go to the county first in order to get certified by their certification standards to meet specific medical requirements in order for you to get that paperwork and bring it back to us at the city to confirm you are actually physically disabled enough to qualify for our services of transportation. She was baffled at that and said it is a joke because how is she supposed to get to Downey when she can't even get to her actual medical appointment within a 1 mile radius? And Downey is, I would estimate, probably at least 18 miles from here. But if you add in the traffic with Los Angeles, it could be as long as 45 minutes from here. So that's one issue. And for me, I would say Los Angeles does have like pop-up food services that they bring in, like regional food trucks to colleges and universities that I've worked at. LA County Department of Health has brought in services for testing. The city could bring in partnership with LA County Department of Health, similar assessments to provide to our seniors or even to different apartment complexes because she lives in an apartment. I've had renters tell me who have lived here for 20 years, they've literally called themselves peasants, is how the city sees them because they are often overseen and forgotten. And as a tenant here myself, they feel comfortable sharing that with me because there are no other candidates running for this district who are tenants either. And I've lived here for 8.5 years. And so, unfortunately, that's that woman's experience. And I've told her, I am so sorry that you've had to deal with that. Another person yesterday I spoke to said he no longer turns on his water for his grass, for anything really besides necessities because he can no longer afford his water bill. And similarly with electricity for many people. And so the city of Covina has a city utility user tax that has been in place for 30 years, and it is 6% tax of all utilities plus your phone bill, like your cell phone bill, on top of the Los Angeles County taxes and on top of the state taxes. And California is known for having high state taxes. Now, that in itself of 6% may not be a lot when you add up your entire bill, but when you add that up times 12 per year, that often hits people who are most low income the hardest and doesn't hit people who have the higher income the most, right? And so on my platform, I want to be rid of the extension. And so that extension is up for vote by the city council this next coming year. And so whoever is elected will determine that extension or not. And so 6% is a lot when you have a family and a home, or even as a renter, right? To have to pay 6% on top of everything else.
Yeah, and taxes are astronomically insane across the country anyway. And we see that, and it hits a lot of other communities even harder, right? So thinking about that, we see oftentimes about how like BlackRock specifically,
Mhm.
a multi-billion-dollar company has like this absolute control over like literally everything in our lives, like literally everything in our lives. They control rent. They, oftentimes, even if it says, oh, this property is owned by XYZ, BlackRock still has some type of like, backdoor deal, right? That's not publicly seen. And then other ones, like you just look it up and you get to see BlackRock's name literally right there. And thinking about that, how do we hold these predatory companies accountable? Now, there's a tenant union here in Kansas City called KC Tenants, and they get together and they hold a lot of these companies accountable. And they've done rental strikes, which have been very
Mm,
successful. They have been, my aunt was in one of those apartments that was deeply harmful. She was the one that raised the big concern about it and got some stuff done. And that's the people power, right? But whenever we
mhm.
think about these influences, and we're going to talk about money in politics. So thinking about money in politics and thinking about, PAC money, thinking about corporate dollars, thinking about APAC, thinking about everything that kind of contributes to American politics, right? Whenever we think about that, what does money in politics look like on a local level? Whenever we think about these PACs, we think of Congress, right? But let's talk about some of that local influence, not only from the state, but also locally. What have you kind of seen in regards to the corporations and such filtering into your election that you are running in, and also just everything around you?
Yeah, thank you for that. So I have been very committed to not receiving any corporate PAC money, no utility money, and I've told that to people while canvassing. No oil money, no big pharma, tech, etc. Nothing harmful, right, to the community or the residents that I would serve. And when I share that with people, they ask, "Oh, does that influence our local politics?" I thought it was federal or anything of that nature? And I say absolutely. So Athens, our local trash company, has a perpetual auto renewal contract with our city council. They currently have a 25-year contract, and after that, every year it's an auto renewal into the 2060s. That's an additional 35 years from now. And so there's specific stipulations that are required in order to break that. And so with multiple candidates currently running for the general municipal election, they have maxed contributions as much as they could if they are current incumbents. And they have also created new PACs under different names according to public records. This is not illegal for them to do, although they are the only funders of these PACs in order to max out the contribution of $5,900. Because if the incumbents are going to vote or have voted on anything related to the utility company, they can only contribute $499. And so in writing, as Athens, the utility company, they have only contributed $499. But as a PAC that they have been the only supplier to, they have maxed out $5,900. And so it's quite fascinating when you look at the actual financial records when it comes to the multimillionaire real estate moguls, you can call them. Uh, the McIntyre family is worth at least $18 million dollars in the city of Covina and owns much of the real estate investment properties of retail, residential in Covina and West Covina. They are dropping $5,000 checks to people who will ensure their contracts will stay in the city of Covina. And most recently, there was a lawsuit that was placed and posted in the San Gabriel Valley Tribune, our local newspaper, where there's a lawsuit happening for someone who did not receive a permit for a weed dispensary business based on the city rubric, and it's going to go in front of a judge in early May to determine if the lawsuit can move forward. And the McIntyre family owns multiple of those real estate um, buildings. So it's all tied together in terms of how politics work. And it's really unfortunate because if I were to be in city council, I would want to cap maximum contributions because $5,900 is thousands of dollars more than what somebody could actually contribute to our congressional representative. And that's mind blowing to me. So unfortunately, it's very much a pay for play.
Exactly. I was just getting ready to say that. That's exactly what I was getting ready to say.
Mhm.
So I'm glad that we're having this conversation because this is deeply important to highlight local influence because oftentimes local elections, people are like, oh, they can't really do much anyway. Oh, but they can. And there's a lot that they can do. So thinking about, kind of pivoting for a second and going in and talking about safety. So what does safety look like? Well, that could look like a number of things. And there's a couple different things that I wanted to hit on your platform specifically. And one of them is accessibility. So whenever we think about accessibility, I'm thinking about people with disabilities, mobility, getting around the city, is there sidewalks, is there, bike lanes, like thinking about different things like this. And one of the things that you have on your platform talks about the Covina Best Project. Can you walk us through like what that specifically is and what it absolutely would do? And is it currently existing or is this a project that's being talked about? I don't know a whole lot about like the California like makeup specifically, so I'm curious to know what the Covina Best Project is and how it can definitely. You talk about it was such a review and or prevent billionaire corporations from extracting the land in Covina for exploitation. Can you run us through this really quickly?
Yeah, so BESS is battery energy storage system. And so the corporation RWE, it is a German corporation who has courted the city of Covina, and the city of Covina last year did a zoning amendment for including the definition of a battery energy storage system at Edna Place, which is near our down north of our downtown area, across the street from a senior center, across the street from newly built townhomes who sold homes about 2 years ago. And so recently there was some public information sessions with RWE, the $48 billion corporation, of which 6% of it is owned by BlackRock, 10% Qatari. And so when I asked questions at that information session, because last year there was a zoning amendment, I asked, when did this relationship actually start? The representative shared that the relationship started with the city of Covina back in 2019. And HOA presidents were there, as well as residents who lived in the townhomes who bought their homes within the last 3 years, and asked, why weren't we informed about this if the relationship started in 2019? Because had they known, they would not have bought the homes that would be right across the street from the battery energy storage system. So the battery energy storage system will have 30 containers that are the size of semi-truck containers, 30 of those filled with lithium batteries in order to store energy during the day to put back into the grid of Southern California Edison in order to prevent rolling blackouts. But there is no benefit at all whatsoever for the city of Covina and will only have three long-term jobs. 100 jobs for short-term while building out the BESS, but only three long-term jobs. And there are already businesses who have sold and shut down and currently selling and shutting down in order to have the BESS project be there, even though the city council has not even approved the project yet. And some business owners were told as far back as 2 years ago that they had to vacate by June of 2026. And so it's very concerning that all of that has been in motion for years, and now only the public is knowing about this. So there's safety concerns as well. LA County Fire Department, Local Union 1014 sent a cease and desist letter to Los Angeles County CEO because of the concern of runaway fires and the toxicity of
Goodness.
lithium burning. If firefighters are telling us that this is incredibly unsafe in residential communities, then we should probably listen to them.
Absolutely, because they know best. I mean, it's literally in the name, firefighter, right? They don't want to come out there and waste the resources that is obviously completely preventable, right? And this
Yep.
is not good for local communities. Thinking about that, and also like the AI data centers that are also popping up across the country, they are deeply harmful to local residents. But these billionaires, they don't give a damn about us, and they have proven that time and
Mhm.
time again because they see an opportunity to make a quick buck, and that's what they care about. And we live in this capitalistic society in where billionaires have more influence and more power than we the people, or at least they think they do, because there
Yep.
are more of us than there are of them. But a lot of people fear that retaliation for speaking up. Like they can lose their housing, they can lose their health care, they can lose like
Yep.
their jobs, because they could be doxxed.
Yes.
We've seen that a lot with a certain situation that happened last year, and I'm not going to dive into that. We all know what I'm
Mhm.
talking about, but a lot of people lost their jobs due
Yeah.
to speaking their mind. But
Yes.
also thinking about that and kind of jumping into like legal aid resources, um, obviously, safety and legal aid resources should be provided to residents that reflect the diversity of Covina. Reading directly from your website, um, including more social workers to support domestic violence survivors and families impacted. Let's dive into this a little bit. So, what does, in your area, are there domestic violence shelters? Are there, homeless shelters? What does like those legal aid resources and like community resources look like in your area? And what would you propose as far as bringing more of those resources to your local community?
Yeah.
This is such a good
So,
question. So,
no, I'm glad you asked it. So, we do have a YWCA here in the city of Covina who does offer resources and support for survivors.
Mhm.
The actual shelters, there are some nearby that do offer support, and the address, of course, is not publicized. When it comes to actual resources from the city itself, so I did do a ride along with the Covina PD in November, and I had never done that before. I did find some pause for concern because while I was doing the ride along, there were domestic violence calls that I was a part of, riding along with the supervisor. And there is only one social worker who works for the police department 1 day a week for 8 hours on Thursdays. And domestic violence doesn't just occur 1 day a week for 8 hours a day on a Thursday. As a survivor myself who has utilized these resources when I lived in a major city earlier in life, that is not how this operates. And so the city has chosen to invest in our police department in the past by renovating their entire gym, which has cost $10,000. They have moved money from public transportation, from environmental waste to pay for 79 AI surveillance cameras to be put up in city parks, in downtown, and elsewhere. That cost $588,000. That in itself could have paid for at least two full-time social workers to work for the city of Covina. And arguably, investing in people to where it's human-centered could also be preventative and instead of being reactive. And so when I was on that call, they had arrested someone and they gave the adult who was still there and the children pieces of paper. That to me is inappropriate, neglectful, and irrefutably inadequate. People deserve more than that. And there needs to be support staff to be there in those moments, especially for children who have to witness that happening, because those are markers and potential determinators for the future in which mental health comes up later in life and patterns of behavior come up. And so a piece of paper is not going to it's not going to change that for a child. And so that's how I foresee that vision.
And speaking of children, there's a alarming rate of gun violence that
Yes.
is going directly towards like the youth population. And gun violence is the leading cause of death amongst children. So thinking about that, one of the endorsements or one of the candidate distinctions that you have received is from Moms Demand Action as a gun sense candidate for 2026 and District 5. So whenever we think of District 5 in Covina, but also just the city in California, gun violence is no stranger, right? So whenever we think about gun violence, what does it look like in your local community and how has the community responded in regards to gun violence?
Yeah. So I'm thinking about two different instances that have occurred in Covina. One of them was not in the district. The other one was that I was told about. So I'll speak to the one that was in the district that I was told about. So on the very east, no, the very west side of District 5, I share about the concern for that neighborhood because of what residents have shared with me who have been there for decades. That specific neighborhood has no street lights. It's never had street lights. There are no sidewalks. And a resident who was talking to me about how he had to get a permit in order to put lights at the end of his driveway and pay for that. Across the street from him, there was a child shot and killed. And had the response been faster from the fire department, from the police department, the child could have been saved. And so Unfortunately, that was not the case. And he did share with me, though, that the police, at least the police volunteers, the parking department is there all the time, though, to give them all tickets for when they're parking incorrectly. And that really resonated with me because I have heard that quite often. Um, so for me, I have seen buyback programs work very well in Los Angeles County, and there are no questions asked, right? It doesn't matter if it's a ghost gun or if it's one that's unregistered, whatever the case may be. I think buyback programs can be incredibly useful. And I would say also the importance of really education about what it means to even get a gun. I don't think people understand what the entire process is, right? Um, for me, myself, when it comes to guns, I, at different points of my life, grew up around them, um, in my lived experience. And I understand that people appreciate owning them. And at the same time, there needs to be a education around the public of the unique role of owning them, right? Because much of the deaths that come from guns is a part of, unfortunately, people completing suicide. And so there also needs to be education on that. And as somebody who has, I don't know if I should phrase it as surviving suicide, but having suicidal ideation, having had students who have completed, there needs to be more of a proactive stance on ensuring safety of owning a gun, especially if you have children, especially if you have folks who have access to that and it's not done in the appropriate manner, and educating people about that, right? As well as domestic violence. People who have experienced that from their partners or other people, such as stalkers, are way more likely to experience death by a gun when that is in the home. And again, that goes back to being proactive in regards to having survivor support services, right? It is all a trickle effect. It is all a ripple effect because it informs one another through a cycle. And even what we've seen recently, right, with the 62 million men who have gone to this Rape Academy website. I don't know if you've seen that. It's wild and also a part of the system.
Millions of viewers visited that website in February, and it's even worse in March. And
Yes.
we're obviously waiting to see, which this is really wild to think about, but we're waiting to see what the April number looks like now that it's been brought to the forefront.
Yes.
Because, and I'm very like critical of like mainstream media. Okay, I'll be first to say it because they're complicit in the silence, right? But CNN did a phenomenal job on breaking this and creating, this conversation around this. And today is April 19th, and I woke up this morning to a devastating situation along the lines of gun violence and domestic violence. And again, viewer discretion is advised beyond this point because this is a deeply alarming headline. 8 children were killed in a Louisiana mass shooting this morning. Three separate locations. The alleged gunman, and this is from NBC News, the alleged gunman who is related to some of the children was killed after a vehicle chase, according to
Mm.
police. Officers with the Shreveport, Louisiana Police Department responded to the 300 block of West 79th Street just after 6 a.m. following reports of a domestic disturbance. Police spokesperson described the crime scene as extensive, spanning 2 homes in the area and a third on a home that's nearby. So essentially, 3 separate scenes. Um, 10 victims in all were shot, and they're not sharing any more information in
Wow.
regards to like that specific aspect. The individual responsible, once leaving the scene, performed a carjacking and proximity corner At which time, Shreveport police patrol officers got behind that vehicle in a chase incident and shot and killed the suspect or the alleged suspect. They didn't share any other details leading up to this because obviously it's an active investigation, but it paints the need of why we need to focus on violence prevention and, talk
Hmm.
about these resources and, the expanded, because there's been a lot of budget cuts and a lot of grants that have been cut in regards to the funding that goes to
I
these
know.
organizations that fight for prevention aspects. But thinking about that, you know, um, do you know if your local police department has a 287G contract with the Department of
Oh,
Homeland Security?
they do not. So in the state of
Good,
California, that is
good,
banned.
good.
Like it is not allowed. Although I have had conversations repeatedly over the past year in regards to what the Covina Police Department can, I should not phrase it that way. In regards to what the Covina Police Department is willing to do,
Mhm.
because there are things they can do and then unwilling to do. So Sheriff Luna in Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department has directed the Sheriff's Department to check warrants, to move about in doing in unmasking ICE agents when that was able to happen for a temporary basis. Right now, it's going through litigation, of course. And um, for our police department here in Covina, by checking warrants or asking for a warrant, that can be seen as obstructing justice, according to our police chief.
Mhm.
And so I have questioned that because I am, as far as I know, because there have been no comments in regards to this from the other person running in this District 5 race. I have responded to the ICE raids in our city at Home Depot and elsewhere and spoken to family members after people have been taken. And they've requested videos or pictures, whatever it may be, and we have provided it when possible. And so it is such a moment that I can't use words to describe when talking to children who need to make decisions and are literally processing out loud in the moment to determine how they will be able to remain housed and sheltered with now their parent gone. And at that time, and I believe even since then, there have not been any elected people in Covina who have done that whatsoever, besides our current city treasurer, Neil Paulson. That's it. And that is tragic.
Which is deeply alarming, right? Because it makes you also wonder, like, are they paying attention? Are they, or do they just not literally care?
They
And
know.
it's just,
They're,
um,
yeah, they're very well aware because myself and other organizers have gone repeatedly over the past year to city council telling them this is literally happening. And even after it happens, gone to city council and said, this happened. Why were you not there to support these families? And it's one of them who is now a mayor has made statements about not liking how this is happening, and then also refers to Obama having been the deporter in chief,
mhm.
which is not useful right now. And the city of Covina has 27 flock cams throughout the city.
Oof.
And cities, whether or not people want the flock cams, may be a different conversation. And also, the city of Cal or the state of California has multiple lawsuits happening right now from citizens who are pushing back because of the invasion of privacy, because hackers have gotten into the flock cams and followed people home or followed their children to where the children were at. And
Which raises
then,
a whole nother level of
yes,
concern.
absolutely.
And thinking
And
about that, they cannot sit here and state that, oh, we're going to protect children, we're protecting children, whenever you're literally going to zone in on every aspect of their lives. And not even just children, just people in general. We have surveillance laws for a specific reason, but it seems like those laws have kind of went to the wayside. And it also raises, like I said, it raises a whole another level of concern. And there's a lot of work to do around that. I know a lot of communities are pushing back against those flock cameras for obvious various reasons. And, the main reason is, the anti-surveillance, in the land of the free, it doesn't really feel like that anymore. It doesn't, unless you are contributing to what's happening right now and thinking about that, the Lincoln Riley Act set the precedent of what's happening right at this very moment. Um, I don't want to downplay what happened to Laken Riley. It was deeply horrific, but that person received due process and is now in prison. And I said a key thing: the right to due process is guaranteed by the Fifth and the 14th Amendment. And what's happening right now is not the right to due process. Due process is literally required by the U.S. Constitution, as I said, of the Fifth and 14th Amendment. You know this, I know that, but does people or do people just not understand what due process is? Is there a lack of education? Because it wasn't, I can tell you this, it wasn't really talked about in my school during like my government class. It was not talked about. It was not covered. It's just, we know what the amendment is, but it didn't break it down. And that is intentional. So
mm,
thinking about that, is there anything else that you wanted to share to our listeners? And then also, how can people contribute to your campaign, first of all? And then secondly, how can they also follow you and uplift the work that you were doing on social media, etc.? Because your donation link will be in the description of this episode, as well as your social media handle, as well as your website. It's all going to be in that description link. But for anybody who's listening, how can they contribute to your campaign and uplift the work that you are doing?
yes, thank you so much. So I would say if you're interested in learning more, please go to votecovina.com, where myself and other folks who are running with me in Covina that I've endorsed and have endorsed myself, who are very aligned candidates who have also been endorsed by similar organizations such as California Working Families Parties, Stonewall Dems, our local United San Gabriel Valley Democrats Club, who are very much aligned and here for the people, with the people, only taking uh, individual contributions. Please go there. We also have a Mobilize that you can find on my link tree. If you go to linktree/ Serrano, Serrano, four, the number four, and then Covina, Covina, or just follow me on socials at Serrano for Covina. That would be wonderful. And I'm using Act Blue for contributions. So anything you can contribute, whether that be even $20, that in itself pays for like 30 door hangers. Everything is union made, and I also have phone banking. Anywhere you're at in the country, you can do phone banking for me. That's on my Mobilize. Or if you're local, we are doing canvassing almost every day of the week. So feel free to DM me or just follow me on socials and share whatever you can.
And one last quick thing is this election is historic for you. Per the Advocates for Trans Equality, do you want to share why this campaign is historic for you? And if you were to win this election, you would break history. Can you talk about that just for like a brief second? I mentioned this at the beginning, but I wanted to save this for the very, very last because this is the most important aspect. But do you want to talk about that just for a brief moment?
Yeah. So if I were to be elected, which I'm very much hoping and excited
Mhm.
to do so, then I would be the first Latino trans man to be able to vote on legislation in United States history. And I am very excited to have that be done with people power and really prioritizing people over profits in this election because that's what it's about right now. And it's about community aid and support. And that's where we got to get to.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. I am so incredibly excited for your campaign. And, I want to say thank you not only for running, but secondly, just for being very transparent and having this conversation with me because I think like I said, local elections are oftentimes left out of the political conversation. And a lot of people don't believe that they matter or it's not going to leave a big impact. It does, because that is literally the community in which you currently live in. That is deeply important. You want to see your life be better. So does everybody else around you, regardless if they recognize that or not. Now, obviously, one may be better for me, it may not be better for you, but the end game is to make it better for like everybody, to where everybody can thrive, everybody can live their life the way that they want to live it without the fear of rejection, without the fear of, and the constant fear of an ICE raid. ICE does not belong in our communities, point blank. End of
Nope.
story. They do not belong. What does belong is our local organizations that are fighting for public health, that are fighting, to end these immigration raids. But what also belongs is the people. We make America great, and that is the true America first. And my goal is to take that phrase back because how are we America first when we put other countries over us, right? I don't need to go into that. We all know exactly what I'm talking about whenever I say that. But, you know, um, Dr. Bri, I am so excited, to continue watching your campaign, continue watching you. Please stay in contact. You have an open invite anytime you'd like to be on the show, anytime you have anything you want to talk about. You can collaborate with us on social media. We're here to amplify and uplift the work that you are doing. And I want to say thank you. We don't do candidate recommendation or we don't do candidate endorsements necessarily, but I'm putting together a candidate recommendation list, and you will be on there because I highly believe in the work that you are doing. I highly support the work that you are doing. Obviously, as a queer person myself and my partner is trans, this is deeply important to me. So again, I want to say thank you. I greatly appreciate you. I greatly appreciate this conversation, and I look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure and very much joyful of being able to share space and time with you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.